importantly, I was wondering if we would all talk about what would, I don't think amnesty is the right word. What would it mean to come back together with some of the people we've broken from? What would that take? How could that be healed? Is there a way for it to be healed? What are we looking for? Because I think I have some particular people in my mind when I think of a way to come, people who I would want to come back to, and what I would need for that to be possible.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, writer and teacher Jessica, and community organizer and socialist Kenny Cepeda. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find that link to our blog in the episode notes. You can also find our social media handles as @Don Eduardo Barca and @ZepDK on Instagram, and Jess's Twitter handle as @JHomie89. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. But I want to say something that comes up on this calendar that's very important. And every day there's something happening. And I just want to say, in Mexico, please forgive me, Andy, you're going to kill me. But please, in 1983, Mexico, today is the Zapatista National Liberation Army was born. So today is a special date. So today's topic will be discussing a discussion we've had on and off line about maybe amnesty or forgiveness, or how do we move past our differences that we had during the pandemic in 2020, 2021, when we've worked sometimes along with or sometimes we worked separately with other folks. This is something that we've discussed in Workers and Students for Choice. It was brought up when I brought up specifically about working with other other people at my school site where they were opposed to the reopening of schools. And there was an article in The Atlantic that we're going to be possibly discussing, but more than that, we're going to be asking ourselves questions that came up in the last episode about my bringing up Noam Chomsky. And Jessica and Kenny's and Andy's response was holding him accountable in response to what I had said about like him being one of the people that I admire still, even though I still don't agree with his stance on the pandemic, where he mentioned something about the Russian war, and I said that I thought it was valid. But this has come up. It's come up in my organizing. It's come up in Workers and Students for Choice. It's coming up in our What's Left. So we'll be discussing that about what we think of this notion of amnesty, of forgiveness, of working with people who've had our differences before. So that's what I think we'll be exploring on today's episode.
Well, I read the article like 45 minutes ago. I heard everybody talking about it last week or whenever it was that it came out. And I mean, yeah, it sounded like a bunch of BS and like valid critiques from people who are more kind of aligned with us. But I kind of thought it would just be an eye roll when I read it. But I gotta tell you, like, it made me livid. I don't know if I'm just in a bad mood today, maybe a little bit, but like I had to pour myself a glass of wine like between the reading of it and logging on here. Like, oh my God. So yeah, but I don't know. I guess Andy's intro won't be in there, but I think what you said about the article being BS, but the question of forgiveness or mending relationships, bridges, whatever that might or might not look like being valid. Yeah, that I guess I'm more interested in the second part. Like, sure, let's discuss the article, but yeah, Eduardo might not be the only one on a rant.
Do you think you can say why you think it made you so upset?
Well, do we want to like get into the specifics of the article? Because I don't know if I can without doing that.
Maybe we'll save it then. Let's go around then, and then we'll see if we get into your anger a little bit more later.
Yeah.
Kenny?
So I actually didn't read the article. But I did think a lot about this question of forgiveness, and I've mentioned that I've taken a step back, from like all the energy like that it took during that period of, standing up for what I thought was right, in standing in isolation, and so I actually came to this conversation more to try to find answers, because I think I have more questions than answers. Like, I ask myself, you know, what is there to forgive? What was broken, or was there nothing broken? Maybe because I feel like I started to see new things that I didn't see before, and so I'm not, part of my seclusion, from being too hyper engaged with everything about AI and COVID vaccines and Fauci, the CDC, and all this bullshit. Part of my seclusion is just to protect my energy, because maybe that was the thing that was damaged. I was forced to spend a lot of my own energy while being vilified and by people that once stood by my side, and or that valued my opinions. But suddenly that changed, and like, looking back, I don't, there is rationality. There is the reasons why people, they thought they were doing, well, and it's not completely people's faults, like, entirely. Like, it's a mixed bag of things. So again, I don't know what is there for me to forgive. What I do know is that, because that was a real event, right? We can theorize about the politics of things. We can theorize about, but that was a real thing, right? Like, that's when you showed up where you stood. But it affected lives. It destroyed people's lives. It had a human cost. In And so, more than anything, it showed me where I stood. And it also showed me where people who said that were next to me didn't show up. And so I don't know if there's anything for me to forgive. I think my eyes are more wide open, and so from there is where I'm parting, and I have to find out, like, what kind of relationships do I want to have. And so I don't know if, and that's at least what's in my mind, because I don't know if, like, I need to forgive anything, to only one person in my life has tried to apologize for some of the harassment, not so much the facts, fuck the facts, but for the human aspect. Because once he's heard that episode where, I talked about the cost of, the anxiety, the time I lost from seeing the last year of my cousin on this earth, because I couldn't travel to Canada, because that was a real cost to me, to wait that, but I don't think it was necessarily people's fault, because there's a whole fucking system, and so I don't know, I don't, I'm more, again, I have more questions as to, yeah.
It might be worth, well, if and when we dig into the article, it might be worth trying to figure out, like, who is the Amnesty article? Are they talking about amnesty for decision makers, policy makers, or are they talking about people in daily life, or both? And then, as we're applying it to our own.
Yeah, I probably am agreeing with Kenny ultimately that we don't want to spend too much time with that article, except to say that person who wrote that article was playing a game. It's like Chomsky, like, full of shit. And what they were attempting to do was draw an equal sign between the forgiveness that you might need, or that you might reach out to a person who's in your life, a brother, a sister, a friend, a comrade, and they were drawing an equal sign to the state and to the political officials, and say, just like we need to reach across the aisle to the people we love. We also have to be prepared to have that kind of forgiveness for the people who are running society and who made these decisions. It's a trickster game. It's like a devilish imp coming in and trying to fool you into something that you should know better. And that's what was upsetting for me, is the game that this person was playing. And I think they know it. And I think they, like, what's interesting to me, like, this is the one detail I had never heard in the article, was they told a story about their family in the early days of COVID, who basically took a hike like a goddamn Navy SEAL team, using hand signals to decide, who was wearing a mask and things like that, because they were so fucking crazy that they thought, like, we got to be careful as we walk the trail if we see anybody else who's walking the trail without a mask on, because we've woven our cloth masks, which have nothing, like, whatever. I don't even want to get into them not doing anything. So that's how they walk the trail. And then they're so nuts that their 4-year-old kid, screams social distancing when another child gets near them. And that same family,
4-year-old,
4-year-old,
4-year-old of their own volition.
Right, that shows how nuts. And then the next line is talking about how this person is teaching a course on COVID. And that's all I have to know. Like, this person who has no insight into anything, all they are a state shill, basically is now teaching a course on how to understand COVID. So it's a wrap.
Perhaps worth noting that Emily Oster is a Goldman Sachs University professor of economics at Brown.
Right. So that there's no credibility whatsoever. It is just an attempt to fool us. It's actually, and this is the part that might be damaging, if somebody who actually I cared about read it, it might fool them into thinking it's all good. That's the part that creates some fear for me, is that the people who I would actually want to have a bridge across, like my sister, if she read that, would she think, oh, would that make it more unlikely, because in her mind, oh yeah, mistakes were made. And no, that's not what happened with us and other people. It certainly is not what happened with the state. The state made no mistakes. They did exactly what they intended to do. And the people who are saying they got it all wrong want to do no re-examination. And I would include, I sent an article about Tim Robbins, who was saying, hey, I think we've made some mistakes here. But honestly, does he go back and look, how did I get this so fucking wrong? Like, I remember when I looked at Russia and thought Russia was not going into Ukraine. And when they went into Ukraine, I was like, I got it completely wrong. I have to rethink my whole thing now. And this is true for these people like Tim Robbins. And I don't see him rethinking. He looks like he's still kind of stuck and just saying, well, now it's over, But there is something I'm looking for. I don't know if the word forgiveness fits into it in terms of, it's not a question of, it's a question of, I do require some accountability on the part of people who I would say abandoned me. And I say they did abandon me. And it's not, so I'm not upset with the state. The state didn't abandon me. They were never my friend. I had some illusions about the state. That was my problem. I think I've shed even some of those illusions that I didn't even know I had. But it doesn't, there are people in my life who I feel like should not have abandoned me over a disagreement. And that's the people who I do think I have to ask, what would be the way back for us to be able to reconnect in a meaningful way, where I'm not looking over my shoulder going like, well, you kind of fucked me before, so I'm just kind of waiting for that to happen again when the shit hits the fan. And that's the only meaningful, like, for me, that's the only meaningful reconnection, is something that allows that broken trust to be mended, and to actually go forward with a sense of, oh, we've actually gone through something, and now I can actually maybe even trust you more as a result of this process than I did before this process we went through it. That's what I'm looking for.
Hypothetically, though, Andy, because like I know for me, this entire conversation in terms of like people in our lives is hypothetical. Kenny, you said one person has like made some effort to admit that they maybe didn't act very appropriately. Like, I'm just curious, like, are you guys Are people
Yeah,
coming to you apologizing? Like,
there's nothing. No, there's zero. But I'm saying, what am I looking for? So there's actually nothing coming my way. But whether it happens or not, I do think it's important for me to know, for people who are still important in my life, what am I looking for from them?
Eduardo, you should go because you wanted to start, and all three of us have talked and you haven't.
I mean, I just was, I didn't know how lively it was going to get, so I thought I would start to get us going. But no, you all were saying good stuff that I'm listening to, I'm reflecting. It's made me think some things about what I wanted to say. And I mean, I'm glad you all started actually, because I don't know. I think I'm starting to find some differences between us. And maybe it's because I don't know. It has to do with my personality. I'm not, ¿cómo se dice rencoroso? Like,
Resentful?
¿cómo?
Resentful?
Yeah, I'm not a very resentful person, but I am someone who brings up the past as a reminder of like what you did, so that you know, like, this was very wrong of you. This is very wrong of you, and don't do it again. And so there's a lot that I want to share. So I'll just start with this. So I guess the article by Emily Oster was trying to find a way for us to bridge, again, working together with other people. She was saying that she was for the reopening of schools and other people were not. And there was they called her teacher killer, right? And that was something that I've been called. I've been called anti-union. I've been called anti-teacher. I've been teacher killer. I've been called, I want teachers to die. That's what I want people. That's basically what people said to me when I wanted to reopen schools. And I, so I sympathize with her stance. I obviously don't have, there's a lot that she stands for that I don't, but just in that area, just that aspect, I understand that piece. It's challenging to think. I think I'm not going to think about the state so much, because of course I think they were very intentional, knew what was happening. If you could go to the French Laundry and you can go to Martha Stewart and you're telling people to shut down, you obviously know something, and that's the reason why you're doing that, and it's not that threatening. So that's to all the people who are at the very top, the governing class, right? But I'm going to call out the people at the local level, because that were happening here. There are people here in San Francisco, specifically because that's where I was organizing, that have not come out and publicly stated that they were wrong. And one of those people is working with me closely currently at my school site, and where I'm currently organizing with families. And she is part of the union. She is part of the union, and she last year was caught. She's saying it on video a lot of the time. She's to shut down schools, and saying, alongside with other people, her group and the caravan were all saying that only white families wanted to return, and saying crazy things like, "Oh, if you're not for this, you're anti-union, you're anti-teacher," and being attacked by her personally. I mean, I'm sitting literally a meter away from this person who said a lot of things about me to other teachers, who like didn't even want me to be around uh the staff party. Like, people really made me feel like I was against them, and who also said that I was being paid by somebody because I released a video. I'll show the video.
It's time to go back. We've done it before in previous pandemics.
School survey results overwhelmingly show families like me want to go back.
For families that are not ready to return, you'll always have the option to learn at home.
The science is clear. Our schools and our children are not super spreaders. We can go back safely, and of course, fight for more resources, but we have to include familias in the struggle. We have to do it simultaneously.
Keep our families safe. No more Zoom, no more Google. We need in-person classes.
I was being paid by somebody because I released a video that Jonathan, my brother, and I produced with no payment. I was out of like using this computer for the reopening of schools. We were told that we were being used by who? But I'm like by who though? Like you're the one who ran to get elected using COVID as the issue to get elected. You're the one with all these other intentions out there. And if they see this, you're the one over there using COVID, politicizing COVID to get your way and to hijack the whole thing so that you can get elected in the union. What was I doing? I wasn't getting paid by anybody. So
not even Putin.
no, I mean, I could use a little money right now. Nobody's paying me. So what was that comment about, right? And I'm glad someone told her, like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. So I guess for me, as I'm reading this, it's like this by Emily Oster, like I'm feeling very I think it's for there to be closure, there needs to be some sort of like we need to like hash it out in public or something, or we need to discuss it or something. And I want that union and the teachers who organize for the opening of schools to really like that's what I feel like I want it to be happen. I want an open public debate, which they're not going to admit. I don't think they will. They won't admit they were wrong because that would make them look bad. They're trying to save face. And that is what I think that's where I think that people are not, they're disingenuous about their intentions, and that's different from here where we're on what's left. And in this circle, you said, Andy, I'm glad you said you got it wrong on Russia, you said, right? And I've been wrong many times on what's left. And I have come out and I've said, I've changed my position on this. And, if you're honest, there's reasons why we stand the way that we stand. And if you're honest, you're going to admit, you're going to say, well, I had that wrong. Oh, you know what? I realize now. And throughout this whole process, it's been embarrassing and cringy watching me evolutionize before everyone else. Luckily, we're a small channel, but the day I get published or something, people are gonna dig shit and they're gonna find stuff. And this is like a tattoo, and that's all right. That's fine. But the thing is, I'm honest, and I wish the people were honest on the other side. I wish people were honest, and that's what I hope that people, if they're going to listen, I don't think they are, but if they were to listen to this, like I wish they would be honest about their mistakes. Then it'd be like real closure, right? It's hard for me to be in the same room with the person who called me an anti-teacher and anti-union. It's hard to be in the same room with the person. But I also know, I recognize that I have bigger goals, and that's where the disagreement with you both come. And I want to give you both, all three of you, a chance. Here's a disagreement. Like I don't know if I understood this from you all, but I am going to work along. There are other greater things I have to move forward with, and that might mean I have to work with people who really tore me apart, on a personal level, play dirty politics. Stop there.
Well, just on the honesty thing, I mean, even this article, like even just on the surface level, it's not actually asking for a blanket amnesty, because it says, obviously some, in italics, people intended to mislead and made wildly irresponsible claims. Remember when the public health community had to spend a lot of time and resources urging Americans not to inject themselves with bleach? It's like, well, let's have amnesty with no admission of wrongdoing, but the amnesty isn't even like this blanket bullshit for everybody. Let's just call it even. It's literally only for the people that she deems worthy, right? And I mean, I can think of at least 100 things that were said directly to my face that were far crazier than injecting yourself with bleach. Yeah.
And can you speak about that, Jess? What happened to you during? I actually don't know.
I mean, I had bottles thrown at my head during peaceful protests where I was standing on the side of the road with a sign, smiling with a small group of women. More than once, I had objects like literally thrown at my head. And I'm not interested in like inhabiting some like victimhood. I mean, I do think that like as a working class group, we were victimized for sure. But I'm not interested in like, oh, poor me. But it's just, I don't know. I think reading this just like, it just brought back like all of the trauma. Like we've all been traumatized to degrees that I don't think it's even palpable to us, like how deeply as a collective population. And then particularly just, it opens with like this 4-year-old kid. And I mean, I'm not like this. I feel like this episode is to some extent like part of my worry with it is like, oh, we're just going to be preaching to the choir. But I don't know. Like it's still in some sense pretty raw. I mean, it's been 2.5 years and it's like,
yeah.
I mean, I know that the article it's trying to set like a narrative up, so that discourse can kind of like flow in a certain way, right? Like it's not, you can't take it on its face. But even so, it's just, I mean, like you smothered like the faces of babies forcibly with these like microplastic infested chemical riddled scraps of, what are now like ocean pollution. Like you violated human rights, you censored people, you fired people, you evicted people, literally beat people in some cases, coerced people into taking an injection they didn't fucking want. Thousands of people ODing, right, with absolutely no access to help, no access to community, left our elderly to fucking rot to death alone, away from their families in these horrible, torturous institutions. Locked. I mean, like, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's just like, I don't know, this article just like all came back to me. Domestic violence victims, right, basically locked in their homes with their abusers.
Child abuse rose up.
Child abuse, intubated people against their will, denied people available treatment, barred loved ones from being with them, in medical settings or advocating for them, even separated mothers from babies. I mean, how many times have we gone over that from like the liberal thing? Forced pregnant women to birth while suffocated, and in some cases like without their partner, without a support person.
Yeah,
Like
the collateral damage.
Right, like the amount of damage that's been done, relationships, like even that we have to have this conversation of like, oh, like how do we mend these broken relationships? Like, I mean, I truly think a lot of these relationships can't be mended, won't be mended, like friendships, families, businesses, not to mention like the whole economy being, forced and plunged into a depression, traumatized an entire generation of children, as we've gone over again and again. And then like on a global scale, just the poverty. I mean, millions and millions of people literally like condemned to die or starve to death. I mean, and you want amnesty? Like, fuck off. Like it just, I don't know. And then I think too, like I hear people like kind of collapsing the term amnesty with forgiveness, which I think these are two separate things. Like the article doesn't talk about forgiveness at all, like directly or indirectly. And I think, I don't know, to me, like what it's doing, it's like setting up this like preemptive pardon, or like putting it out there, like so innocently into the discourse that like you don't even have to ask for forgiveness. Like you don't even have to admit that you were wrong. Like we're just going to preemptively open up this door for you to just carry on. Like just carry on. And I mean, I've never expected people to be like running to my doorstep like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have excluded you from this or whatever. But I don't know, it's just it's very devious, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think this article is a continuation of the attack and the abuse that we've taken. It's not an attempt to ameliorate it, because under the cover, that's why it does use the term amnesty and not forgiveness, because amnesty is a political term. And under the cover of making, of doing something that we could talk about, my way back with my sister, or Eduardo, you, because I'm not interested. My first way back is not with people I'm organizing with. My first way back is with family, and that's the kind of people I'm thinking. Could there be a way back that I would want to discuss here?
You keep bringing up your sister. Can you just what are you talking about with your sister?
Well, let's get to that in a second. So under the cover of something that's human, between a break that happens between people who loved each other or trusted each other, that's a human thing. They are attempting, this article is attempting to really prepare us for giving a pardon to the very state that has been attacking us, that escalated its attack over the last 2 years. It was attacking us before that, and it escalated its attack. We've talked about the wealth transfer, and we talked about just all the things Jessica's talked about. That's why this term amnesty is here. It's attempting to cover underneath a human to human thing. It's attempting to encourage us to allow the state to get a pass. And that's never going to happen for me. So that's why you are right, Eduardo, that honesty is central to this. This person who wrote this is entirely dishonest in the writing of it. But I am prepared in another round of these conversations to talk about the thing that Kenny wants to get to, which is, okay, what would it be for me to actually, what would I need to make a way back with people who I care about, who in my opinion, abandoned me in a way through this time? And that's what I'm talking about. Or that's the next conversation. That's the conversation that this article was attempting to fake have in order to make us forgive the state, or give amnesty to the state, or just say, oh, you get a pass for doing whatever. But there is still a meaningful discussion to be had between humans who care about things, about what might be a way who would you want to make peace with, and what would have to happen for that to happen. That's a more interesting discussion for me.
I'm not so sure. For me, there is this extreme separation of the people I organize with and the people I love, because they all know what I stand for. Of course, like, there is the organizers who think they're actively in the war against these, the people who rule our lives. I think there is a distinction maybe there, but like, the people I love, they also know why I say the things I say. Like, I'm not different. I would like to think that way, and so the degree to which we talk about certain topics, might be different. There may be more planning and, with organizers, but so again, it's just, for me, there is not a huge distinction, between, because that to me is giving license to that whole notion that, like, oh, I'm non-political. Everything, like, because even if you say you're not political, you just suffered the collateral damage of the war against the capitalist class. Whether you were on the giving end, but some shit was broken. Like, no one came unscathed, like, at least the masses of people, no one came unscathed from the last 2.5 years. So there is a war. For me, there is a war. If anything, that's what I would want to, push, because this is not surprising. This is obviously the degree to, it is damaging, but this is not new to me. It's just some people choose, or whatever, for whatever reason, You know, they think that they can separate those things, the way they live their lives, you know, and from their ways of loving, their ways of existing, surviving, and just having human relationships. It's all a bundle for me. And so that's why I just want to point that out, that to me, there is not much of a distinction.
I can say there is definitely for me. And this is where I think, where I share Eduardo, well, I think I share Eduardo's thing. So if there were former people from my school who abandoned me, or comrades who abandoned me, who came to a freedom meeting, I would be surprised. And if they reached out to me to say, hey, I see you're doing this around trying to do this with education, could I get involved? I would say yes. And like Eduardo, I would be looking with over my shoulder kind of the whole time, wondering what's this person really about, because they're not, like, I know where they come from, and unless they said something in the meeting that suggested that they had come to a complete re-looking at it, which would also probably then mean they're going to say something to me at some point in time, then I'm going to be like, well, this person's kind of, I'm not sure what's going on with them, but they're they appear to be part of trying to fight this thing in the same way that I will. So I'm going to go forward with it, not ignorantly, not naively, but I'm organizing with them. And so here we go. And so I'm prepared to do that. Like, and I don't, that's a one sort of thing. But as it relates to people who, like for my sister, in order for me to reform my relationship with my sister, I had to admit mistakes I had made. And I did that. It wasn't easy, but I was glad I did it. And I was glad that I apologized for the mistakes I had made in our past that had damaged our relationship. That, in my opinion, only way we were going to come together again on a more meaningful way was if I was going to own my part of the damage that had been done from our family and my part in it. So I believe my sister has abandoned me during this time. When I took a stand against the schools, when I took a stand to not write my name on the thing, she was like, I really don't want to hear about this anymore. And that was very hurtful for me, because I was only keeping her informed, not because I thought she agreed with me, but for her to know something that was very important to me at a very important time in my life. Because we had talked, she's a teacher, I'm a teacher, and we had talked about how meaningful being an educator was. And she was seeing that because of what the state was doing, it was putting me in a position where I had to decide, was I going to stick with my school that I enjoyed teaching at with my comrades and my fellow colleagues, or was I going to take a stand for what I believe in? And that was being forced on me by the state. And she was like, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about this thing you're doing, because I'm not entirely sure why she didn't want to hear about it, but she didn't want to hear about it. And I did not like that. I felt very dropped and left by that. So that relationship, I really would like a way back from that, and to again be brother and sister in the way that we were, but only could be after I apologized for what I had done. And that's, I do think something is needed for that to go forward like that. And that's very different than organizing space to me. And it would require a person, my sister, basically going like, man, I didn't agree with you, but I fucked up. Like, I should not have left you like that. If I have to choose between the state and you, I choose you, because that's what I would choose. I'm not choosing somebody else over the state. But she didn't. She chose the state. And I'm very hurt by that. So I would like a way back from that. I would like a way back from conversations that when we do talk, if we do talk, that are going to be completely surface. But I think it's kind of all or nothing. Either the whole thing gets taken up, the whole question of what happened, why were you thinking that, and are you prepared to own a mistake you made, or nothing. It's all or nothing there. Whereas the organizing space is sort of partial. And it doesn't need to be full for me, because not that I don't care, but I don't need to trust those people in the same way. And I'm prepared to build a little bit of trust through the course of organizing together. That's fine. maybe I'll learn to trust them a little bit more as an organizer. But that's not as meaningful for me as this question of how do we make it back from divides, like in family and in deep, like what I thought were committed relationships that got severed. So
yeah, I think, I don't know, what you just said, Andy, is kind of clarifying for me a little bit, even in the moment, because I think, I mean, it's different for me because I literally left the state. So, you know, I do feel like, I mean, just geographically, like I left those spaces behind. And in terms of organizing, I mean, a lot of the work I was doing was in the animal rights space, and that's an area for me where I'm like, I kind of think I was a little bit wrong or off, like in my approach. Back to family, I think, and what you said about family being different from organizing spaces, and I think, I mean, even family being different from friendships. I mean, I think it's different for different people, right? Like some people, their chosen family like is their family. But yeah, I mean, I feel like for just kind of friends and friendly acquaintances, it really wouldn't take much. Like if you're going to treat me like a human being, I don't need like some formal apology. I agree with Kenny. Like there's not a whole lot to forgive. People are being propagandized at levels that we've never seen in human history. I think there's a fundamental divide if you weren't able to see, especially after a year or two, what was happening, at least a little bit. But I can work with those people. I can train with those people. I can do whatever, like be friends, go to dinner. Like that's cool. It's fine. Family, I feel like it's like I need more and less from family, because I think there's just something distinct. Like I feel like I'm kind of living in a weird liminal space with my family. And I mean, yeah, the sister thing, like I completely lost my sister for about 10 months. Like literally she wouldn't even speak to me over the phone, primarily because of my COVID views. And now it's like maybe like a couple texts a month, and it's like one word answers, you know. She won't let me visit her. She won't visit me. I don't know what to do to like redeem that relationship. And then even with my parents, like I talk to them all the time, but it's just so clear that we're living in different paradigms. And I think as humans, we have a fundamental need to be witnessed, not by everybody, like all the time, but by like the people who you're really, really close to. Like that sense that you were describing, Andy, of like not wanting to hear it, like, oh, I just want to hear about these aspects of your identity, like not your whole authentic self, even if you still disagree, you know, with some or all of your stances, right? Like this thing of like, I don't even want to hear it. Like, I just don't want to hear about that part of your life. And that's kind of where I am at with certainly my parents. Like, I don't know. It's really hard. Like, I don't need like an apology or something from them, but I don't know. Like there's like this distance, and I don't know how to breach it. And then on top of that, I'm so fucking angry at the people who are behind this, at this state and at the policymakers, because I mean, just last week, for example, or a couple weeks ago, my dad got a flu shot, a quadruple strength flu shot, because he's over 65. He can get that now. Apparently it's a thing. This is somebody whose 22-year-old daughter almost died of Guillain-Barré, which is primarily a adverse reaction to the flu shot. My mom went to the doctor and got a shingles vaccine, and then 2 days later got at the same time I think a fifth booster, or I'm sorry, fifth COVID shot, like third booster or something. I don't know. They've like lost track, in one arm at the same time as getting a flu vaccine in the other arm. This is my mother, who is like a primary reason why I am anti-vax. I mean, she vaccinated me as a child, but she was very like against too many. Like she never let me get a flu shot. She was very like conservative in terms of medical interventions growing up. And so like that really shaped me. That's a big part of why I am the way I am and why I've like held this stance during this. And I feel like I support bodily autonomy, but it's really fucking hard to watch them get shot after shot after shot. And I feel like at a certain point, like the state is killing them. And it's so sad. And it's hard for that not to be like present when you're talking, you know, and trying to like, I don't know, salvage your relationship.
It seems to be like I was speaking to my friend Emma in the UK who lives in Kent, and she's still having issues with friends and family. But it seems to be more of something happening with like friends and like close friendships and close family. It's like this stuff happens mostly in the USA and in the UK and other like Australia. It was huge as well, but very militant stuff going on. This doesn't happen normally in Latino families. We just disagree, and then we kind of just accept each other. I know that's true for Kenny. Like they had differences in your family as well. We had differences, but we don't like cut off anyone. So I don't have. So I feel very sympathetic to both of you, Jessica and Andy, but I don't have much to say in as far as this area goes. And I know that Kenny and I share this, and like it's not. We weren't cut off. What my family did say, my cousins who were for the mandates, they did say this. Those of your the friends, this is what changed my mind on like being close to some friends. They said if they weren't sticking by you, they were never your friends to begin with. So they could have a disagreement on it, but like friendships, I'm not talking about family, like friendship. If the people who left you and abandoned you and they decided to go and talk shit about behind you like they did, they were never your friends to begin with. So that was very extreme for one of them to say to me, who believes who believed a lot about the COVID narrative. She said that, and we love each other and talk to each other, even though we have differences of thought about this. And so that for me, so I don't have much to say about family because as I said, we're not talking to each other. But with my friends, like you, Andy, I think I'm going to watch my back. You know, I'll work with them, but I don't think I'd ever trust them the same way. You know, I appeared in the Examiner, I appeared in the SF Chronicle talking, and they used those sorry articles to show other teachers, and then they would meet up in happy hour, and then just all of them as wolves just tear me apart, and I felt like I was a grizzly bear, just going, they were just tearing me apart in their happy hour meetings, and luckily someone would tell me what was happening, and that's why I always tell them, I have ears and eyes everywhere, so don't talk about me. And I found out, and when I did try to make amends, I think I shared it here. I went over to their house, particularly two teacher friends. It turned into a shouting match. I don't know. I don't know if it'll be healed. So I guess I'm glad that both of you shared in this area about like the difference. And that's a good question, like about forgiveness, just like you. So I think in this, as we're talking, I'm thinking out loud. I think there's distinguishing the difference between like working with people. Can we work with people that have had differences with us, and can we can our relationships be repaired or back to where they were before? I think it's about working together for me, and I don't have any interest in investing where I've invested a lot of years and time and energy with people that I thought were my friends and who called me up. So one of them in particular said I was their best friend. I never said that, but she called me, you're like my best friend. We're best friends. Suddenly, you're talking shit about me at happy hour. I don't know if that's what best friends do.
I do I want to be clear that I think it's entirely possible in terms of that personal break to be mended. But it requires 100% accounting for all the stuff. So honesty from me and honesty from the other person. But I do believe there's going to need to be a recognition on the part of the other person. It's not, Jessica, just a question of being seen. It's a question of, it was a question of, in many ways, a moment of a feeling of a fight for survival. I had been humbled by the state to be forced into a Zoom year of employment, a Zoom year of teaching already. And then when I come back, they humiliated me again, saying, if you want to work, you're going to have to shove this thing up your nose. And the last thing was, okay, now we need to know your status. And I was like, that's the line. That was it. I'm done now. All right. I had already been humiliated enough in many ways. And like, I do feel like I had been humbled in many ways. I don't like it, but I had agreed to certain concessions. I agreed to teach on Zoom. I agreed to shove a thing up my nose in order to work at a place. But that was an attack. That was an attack on me. It was an attack on our class. And that's the state coming after us. And finally, there was a point where I said, no, I won't do it. And so in that fight with one of the most, with something that is like purely evil, which is the state and their corporate interests and whatever. And I believe my sister knows that. I mean, maybe she doesn't see it as whole evil. She sided with them. She was like, I don't want to hear about you having to fight them. I don't want to hear about it. And she knows how it's going to go. Like, think about, in my opinion, it's like, what if I was being tortured? I don't want to hear about it. Because I kind of was. That's what's going on here. And that's an abandonment that I would have never done. Like, I don't agree with everything that people that I love do. But if the fucking state comes after them, I'm taking sides. So, and I'm taking sides against the state. Easy. That's easy. So that's how I feel about that.
Can I, Andy, that was the most horrible thing that happened to you. You know, it's the attacks that you got and the snitchers that were there at your school. And the thing, it's like you invested so many years at Mission High School in San Francisco. You're a long time teacher, and you not that it matters to you, because I know it doesn't matter to you. You've never even shared much with me about your PhD until later on in my life, but later years. But you are the most qualified person to have worked at SFUSD, and there is a shortage of science and maths teachers at SFUSD. And for them to have taken your livelihood and taken a person from the community at Mission High School, where you have invested so many, you built relationships, and the same teachers who said that you were anti-union, anti-teacher, I said to one of them at one point, I'm sorry, bringing this up. I said to one of them, I want to see you have done and put in the years that Andy has put in. One specific teacher said that he's always going against the union, always making these side groups, always. And I said to this specific teacher who was running for the union, I said, I want to see you do what Andy has done for countless teachers, always defending them, always standing up, even when he disagreed with them, and representing them in the administrative offices. You have no idea how long he's worked in this school district and how long he's been participated in the union. He has done so much. I don't think you and I could ever amount to the work that he has done. And it's no one has seen that. We were thrown. Do you remember, Andy? We walked for the reopening of schools with other families, and they threw eggs at us. Yeah. They threw eggs at kids, at familias. And when they were talking about oh, it's only white families, there was a little group of Latino families that decided to wear their traditional clothing. Because why? Because they wanted to show no, it's not just white, it's us. We're representing familias who was in the hubs, Latino and blacks, high rates. I mean, high percentage of them. So it's a mess. It was really horrible what they did to you. They took away your livelihood. Then it was a threat. Of course, you have a job now. You're stable. Luckily, you got another job. But the thing is, it's they yanked you out, uprooted you out of a community And that, as what you said, it was torture. And I'm glad we talked about it a lot in the What's Left episodes. But I to speak to what happened to you, that didn't happen to me. I wasn't working. I wasn't working. So I really want to just acknowledge that in this episode, because if anyone is interested, they can check out the other episodes. I invite folks, please, Andy, link the other episodes to like what happened as like during live as we were reporting during that time, which is horrendous. And you stood up to the state, and instead we had snitchers, other workers reporting on other workers. It was terrible what they did, and I just think remembering that time, it's just as Jess put it, like it was very traumatic, very traumatic. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just remembering that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was also, for me, it was more of an eye-opening time. Absolutely the anxiety, absolutely the harassment at work. The boxing in of the options for someone who disagreed, right? Like I couldn't just pick up and go to another job because and so here I was. I had to find ways to navigate the system in order to continue to have a livelihood. And so I was mad for sure. I was mad. I'm still passionate about it because this is not over. This is a step, stage of, or another stage in the war. Again, like earlier I said that for me there is no distinction because that is the story I want to share with my family, with my loved ones, because like, I'm sorry, if anything, for me, that this has been my lesson. Like, organizers are not going to change the world. Not organized as we see them right now, as we've experienced it right now. If anything, it's been fucking detrimental. If anything, is very myopic, is very, inconsequential, to be honest, for me. Because those were the first people that went behind this bullshit. Those are the people that are still behind this bullshit. This is my experience in the mission in San Francisco with the Latino community organizing, feeding people. And they're not out of it. I have no hope. If I'm fucking waiting for them to apologize, good luck, fucking Kenny. You're gonna waste your fucking life. So that's why I mean that there is no separation, because guess what? My mother, she's never been to a fucking organizing event in her life. She will never be. She will not be able to have the conversations that we have here with anybody. But she fucking knew from the beginning. And she stood up and she took a stance at work. Even when she was vaccinated, because she chose to, because she was 65 and older. So she had something to think about. She respected my decision, but she took a stance and refused to show her fucking vaccine card until, she had no other option. And so, my brother was my closest comrade at work. He didn't care about hearing the debates. He didn't care about my reasons. His simple reason was like, you cannot force me to do anything that I don't want to do. So if anything, for me, it's been eye-opening. That's why I speak about, living your life, live your politics the way you live your life, and vice versa. They're the same thing to me. If you want to make a different world, we have to live a certain way. We have to show them, we have to defend the things that we want to build. And so I'm done with the priests of organizing. I'm sorry, I am done. With the priests that talk in obscure language, and when the dust settles, because there's been plenty of people that I organize with that are in fucking great jobs now. as a result of the pandemic, because they were the saviors of the community, because they sided with the state, because they never questioned the state. You know, and that to me is a deliberate consequence of all this. You know, that people like Lipson were uprooted from a place where he had roots. I was forced to be uprooted from a place I had roots. And so now we have to, so yes, I don't care to forgive. I will not fucking forget this. This will be brought up just like you, Eduardo. This will be brought up. This will be a fucking thing. And we'll probably continue to disagree, you know, with some people. And we will have to be honest about that. You know, because this is a learning, just like 9/11 was a learning experience. This is a massive learning experience. We were pummeled, the people who want to change this world, pummeled, destroyed to, you know, to the ground. And there are some pockets that have united, I think, but by and large, you know, like we have to reanalyze it. And the way we used to do things that I thought, at least for me, my learning, the way I used to do things, I don't think that's how it's going to happen.
I mean, the only good thing that came out of it was we met people like Jess, right? That was able to like organize with, and then suddenly we found other people, right? Like we have had special bonds and created new comrades with people that I thought think that was cool. Yeah, it was really fucked up. You know, a lot of things were really fucked up. I just remember even now that were like them. I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment to that. I think we should start finding a way to discuss briefly before we wrap up, like what we think about what was said, like, because we didn't spend a lot of time on it last week, on like people like Chomsky. So these are not the governing class, but these are intellectuals, folks. I don't know if that's in, like, I wanted to say something around that, like from the last episode, but
I don't have much to say on that one, but I mean, honestly, if Jess, you have something you want to add?
I mean, only to say one thing we didn't bring up with Chomsky, right, was his gatekeeping of the 9/11 narrative, you know? And so I think, I mean, we should have known even before all of COVID and everything, right? Like, he was always a gatekeeper. He was never on our side, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, I think I kind of said my piece on that last week. I think that the people who were in the public eye, who were making policy decisions, who were driving narratives, who were spreading propaganda, like, that's different to me. Those people have to be held accountable, like materially held accountable. I don't think that's the same thing as, like, you know, my neighbor who just was watching the news and, you know, fell for the psyop.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, and then Eduardo, maybe if there's something you want to add about Chomsky, is the reason that I spend some time thinking about, because Jessica, you had asked this earlier, either in the episode or before the episode. Wait, has anybody gotten an apology yet? If with the Amnesty letter out, and like across the board, no one. I mean, that wasn't true in Workers and Students for Choice too. It's like no one's seen anybody come their way. So let's be clear, among the people we know, like the actual people we know, that we're not hearing anything, and that's not what's going on. But with I do believe that the reason I continue to try to do stuff is with the hope and the possibility of change. And I want to be in that place of not, being separated, being polarizing with people who are coming towards me in the political changes that I hope to be part of making. So if there's people who used to be making fun and now they're back in trying to do something, like Eduardo, I don't know if I'm going to trust them at this point, but with the hope and the understanding that I'm hoping change can happen, change for them, but really change for the world, then I do want to be open to that. I don't want to be cut off from possibilities of doing something good with that person if it's possible. So that's the only reason I even think about that level of people in like so-called coalition kind of thing, because it might happen, and I just want to know how I at least want to put forward for myself how I hope to be. How I will be, we'll see, but how I hope to be is a person who is at least open to the possibility that this person is in a process of coming towards us and towards trying to make a better world. And that's very separate from like trying to find a way back with my sister, which is just a personal thing, which for me is much more important at this point, because I think the likelihood of us succeeding in the end is, small.
Well, I guess we'll just see what happens with my own experience then, because I'm working with people who were on the other side, and I'll report back and see what it's like. I don't at this point. We're not talking about it, but a lot of stuff is being discussed in the school side council at my nephew's school about behavior issues, academic performance, being behind. These things aren't necessarily that important to me anymore as they once were, as I think you both remember when I used to be an advocate for like making sure that education and all these things were like really important. And instead, like it's what last Jess was sharing about demolition. I'm still really considering if we should talk about that anarchist cookbook. We might be forever blacklisted and then taken down for sure. But it is important to them. And what's not being discussed in these conversations is, well, let's look at the mistakes that were done during the pandemic, right? Where no one's talking about it. So if I'm in this working group, and other families are in it, and other teachers are in it, and one of them is a part of the union who was for the closing of schools, we'll see what happens. So I'll report back, just because like I'm the only one, I think from the four of us, only one who's working with other people who are on the opposing side on this issue. So and I'm saying I want to work with them, and I don't know, we'll see what happens. And I called you the night before. I was going to go meet up with them last week, Auntie, and I ranted and I was like, exploded with like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And then Jess and Auntie and I were on the Students and Workers for Choice, and I reported back there. But it is a evolving thing. So let's see. I guess we'll use my experience as like a way to figure out how is it going, and if this amnesty stuff can be applied. I don't know, as we've discussed this, like everything that Jess talked about, the work, the livelihoods of people, and all of the collateral damage that you listed out, Jess, just can be forgiving. I'm not, like I said, I'm a resentful person. I have to carry on. Just what will it look like? So we'll see. What will it look like working together? We'll see. And I'll report back from the drawing board. And to the other point about last week's episode, because I feel like I wanted to say something about it, and I thought it wasn't the time, because we were discussing some other topic entirely.
Okay.
As far as not people who are governing, people who are part of like maybe the intellectual, the analysts, or that even, I don't know if that is a word, but the people who are we've admired, right? People who we thought were revolutionary. This anarchist name kind of like escapes my mind. He wrote the book on Wobblies and the Zapatistas, who asked everyone to vote for Biden. I think we discussed that article or that letter, people in one episode. I think I can still take parts of what I'm in agreement with, but still declare my opposition. And I'm not as, I guess I don't know. It's fine. It's fine that the three of you laid out this brutal attack on Democracy Now! and Chomsky and Prashad last week. That's fine. I thought it was going to be Andy who was going to go after. but I don't have an opposing. It's just I think there's a lot we have to unpack, which we did on this episode. I'm not, for me, I wasn't taking the time to do that. We were discussing Ukraine and Putin and his analysis, and then what was important for me was what they had to say on it. But there are going to be folks like you all who are just going to entirely discredit them for everything now because of what they stood for before. So that's fine too. Or maybe however you might label it, not discredit it, but however you might label it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing. I do feel maybe I will get nervous every time I bring them up or something with y'all trying to go after him. Anyhow, I think we had a good episode. We should find a way to wrap up. Anything else?
No, glad we had this discussion. I'm probably my back. This is one of those episodes where I'm going, I said too much about family, but I'm going to let it ride. So
I think you should consider it, Andy.
No.
I think we should name this episode "Don't Forgive, Don't Forget."
Yeah.
But
luckily, my family doesn't watch the podcast.
Yeah.
They won't.
Well, this one's gonna be a tricky one to title because I'm not sure about "Don't Forgive" because I'm prepared to forgive. With
depends who, right?
Depends how they come back through it. So
Loving the time of COVID.
I think we had that one, and they tried to censor that one.
Oh God, we did. I forget.
All right.
So
okay.
Well, Kenny, think about titles. If you come up with one, let me know. This one's going to be a hard one to title, I think. So we'll see.
Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Here's the other. All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left to post information about our topics and our guests in the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. You can also find our social media handles as at Don Eduardo Barca and at ZeptiK on Instagram, and Jessica's Twitter handle as at JHomie89. As well as if you would like to give us feedback about something further, suggest something for us to cover, contact us around Rose of the Fridays, and you can always contact me. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Hasta luego. Ciao.